All right, I'm just giving the Riverside FM logo enough time to play there. So, hello, Exorcist. Just a little inserted intro here. Ryan and I made this as a video initially, but it was our mutual decision to not actually publish the video on any of the streaming platforms. So, you're just getting the audio, there's no video. I just wanted to clear up any confusion because as you listen to the podcast, there may be some references to things that we're seeing or interacting with the environment. And that was because this was initially recorded with the intention to be published as a video. So go forth and enjoy. And if you take nothing else away from this podcast, know that we do not condone violence. All right, well, welcome, Exorcist, to our next podcast. And as you might have guessed, if you haven't already seen the title of this thing, we are covering not necessarily a horror movie today, but a horror series that is very much loved by the horror community called Dexter. So Ryan and I have seen everything Dexter going back to the original series. We haven't seen the backstory one. We love Dexter, and for very good reason, which is why we're making this episode, and you're going to find out why.
Just get on with it.
So we did get feedback that, one of people's favorite episodes so far has been the episode we did together, which is why Ryan's back today. And so if you don't know who this is, go back and watch the Nightmare on Elm Street episode because you're going to learn a lot about this fella right here. But we got a lot of feedback that we said and y'all and filler words too much. And the Riverside FM, which is the software I'm using for this, does filter out those words. But when it does that, it creates glitches and gaps. And so we are trying to, instead of... we're trying to be more present with each other and conversational with each other today and just see how that goes. And
if we can't really focus on those words, then we made a sign.
Yes, I gave ourselves a reminder to
not to say those three little words.
Be mindful of our language. So, a little behind the scenes of learning podcasting. Also, thank you, Neil, for letting me know what a pop filter is. What the hell? I mean. Literally, I just...
A plus.
This podcast evolved from day one of me sitting on the couch with my iPhone with GarageBand to now I'm learning about things like pop filters, which filter out me getting close to the microphone and all the garble. So hopefully the sound quality is better than ever on this one. So we'll see. All right, enough about that. So I just wanted to say, keep going, baby Levi. Woohoo! Anything else personally you want to plug in there?
I would like to give a shout out to my 3 nephews and my favorite niece. I only have one niece. She's my favorite. Yeah.
Do you think they're listening to this?
Maybe the oldest. Maybe the oldest is. I just kind of want to let them know that I am thinking about them. Back in my days, one of my previous careers, which is why I'm here to talk about that. My experience is I used to sit them, with their mom or dad wouldn't be available, or mom and dad go out on a date. The 2 oldest, the boy and the girl, the niece, they used to come over and stay at my apartment, and I used to sit them, and we used to have a ball. Had a blast, played a lot of games, watched a lot of cartoons. So shout out to them. If they're listening, brings me back to those days.
Yes, good old Uncle Ryan here. What is your uncle name? Well, okay, let me preface that question by, okay, when I moved to Louisiana, I learned that people don't use aunt and uncle and godfather and godmother. They have the whole other set of language up in here in Louisiana.
So I'm a parent to only one of the 4, the oldest. It's a legal thing here in Louisiana. If anything should ever happen to the parents of that child and the grandparents are no longer living, then that particular person or people will be the legal guardians of the kids if they're still minors.
Yeah.
So I'm a parent to the eldest nephew.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right. And so continuing into our episode in the horror community, I'm sure you at least know what Dexter is. It's a show about a serial killer who has a code of ethics and only kills other serial killers. That's the very long story short of it. Anything else you'd like to add to the synopsis of Dexter?
Yeah, that's basically it. He's a serial killer who has been a serial killer since he was probably a little bitty boy, and his father, who is actually his adopted father, notices a pattern that has slowly been developing within this child, where he's killing bugs, then he's killing small animals, then large animals, and at one point his father said, his name is Harry in the show, he sits him down and says, "Hey, is there any time that you can remember ever wanting to kill something more, something like a human being?" And the little boy shakes his head, yes. Mm-hmm. So at that moment, it's Harry's duty to direct the path and energy of Dexter's killing to just, instead of randomly killing people.
Yes, that's a good backstory on Dexter. Dexter's got a very interesting childhood, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. But since we've gone there, I do want to talk a little bit more about this pivotal moment from Dexter's childhood, because to prepare for this episode, Ryan and I went back. Well, we went back and watched the pilot episode of the original Dexter series, which was made, I don't even want to guess,
many years ago.
I don't know. Yeah,
it was at least a decade.
Oh my god, I think it was probably 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
And so we went back and watched the original pilot episode of Dexter, and then we watched the 2 episodes of the latest Dexter series,
The Resurrection.
Dexter Resurrection. It's been a while since we've seen the other ones, but that's what's most recent on our mind, so that's what we're working with. Like Ryan said, there was this moment when Harry was catching on to Dexter's behavior as a kid, and there was an opportunity there to direct Dexter's future, really. To me, like when I saw, this happened actually in the pilot episode of Dexter, and as I was rewatching this now through the lens of a mental health care professional, I was like, oh my God, like this is a crossroads in Dexter's life, and Harry has this moment right now where he can really put Dexter on road A, road B, road C. And what happens, obviously, is Harry puts Dexter on the road to directing his violent urges towards other humans. So Ryan mentioned that, so like you were saying, that Harry noticed this pattern in Dexter's behavior and started questioning him about it. I'm going to talk a lot more as this episode goes along about who Dexter is and Dexter through the lens of mental health, of course, because that's why I'm here, is why this podcast is here. I can't talk about Dexter without using the word psychopath. That is the pop culture word that is always used for people like Dexter and for serial killers. And I'm not saying the word's wrong. I'm going to make my case in this podcast. And then this is just for funsies, because Dexter is not my patient and he's not even a real character. So this is just for fun. I'm going to make the diagnostic case for Dexter, but I'm also going to make the human model for Dexter as we go along in this podcast for the treatment for his mental health. And so let me just first say that right now we're on I don't know if you can see this, the DSM-5 text revision. This is the DSM that I was telling y'all about in my first episode. There's no diagnosis of psychopath in this DSM. And so I realized that I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth a little bit, because in my episode about, my clinical point of view and who I am as a therapist, is I think this all can just toss it. Though it can be useful. So I don't totally think we should toss it, but it can be useful.
Is that something you learn in school, that there's no such thing as the diagnosis of a psychopath?
No, I think it's something that I realized while I was in school, because I won't say that we went through every diagnosis, one by one in the DSM, but we did learn about personality disorders. And when I realized there wasn't a diagnosis of psychopath, I was like, that's interesting. Why do we use this so commonly in society? Like, we call serial killers, murderers, whatever these people are, even someone who's honking at you going down the highway and cutting you off as psychopath. Well, that's not really a formal diagnosis. So the closest thing in the DSM is what's called antisocial personality disorder, which is part of the cluster B part of diagnoses, which I am editing the episode and I could not help but to watch myself in this video and think, man, I'm looking way too big for my britches when it comes to diagnosis. And so I just felt really compelled to come back in here and add a little clip because you may not have watched my episode on my feelings about diagnosis. And I think this is all going to become apparent as the episode plays out. But I just want to go ahead and plant this little seed in your brain that, first of all, this is just for fun for a TV character that is why horror is so fun for all of us, because it's so far removed from actual reality. And I do not recommend anyone try to diagnose their friends or their family or themselves, because you're going to see a really good example of what can happen play out in real time between me and Ryan here in a few minutes. That is one of the many reasons why I think that diagnosis can be potentially harmful. Is you can look at any number of diagnoses and it can start to make sense for anybody or for yourself, and it can start to breed paranoia or distrust of other people. And I don't think that's particularly healthy. And I don't have much real world lived experience in diagnosis. The type of work that I've been doing for the past 2 years does not require that I provide diagnoses for clients unless they request one. And I certainly don't have the experience with this very specific type of diagnosis. And so a lot of what I'm speaking about in this podcast is from purely academic standpoint. In case you haven't seen my other podcasts, you will know that sometimes I get really caught up in the nuance of language and semantics. And this is exactly what's playing out right now on this podcast. And because of that, I do feel like I needed to make a little bit of a correction to the record. I did go back and do a wee bit of research on psychopathy. And in the DSM, under antisocial personality disorder, it does say in the not under the diagnostic criteria, but under the diagnostic features, it does say this pattern has been referred to as psychopathy, sociopathy, or dissocial personality disorder. So it's not like the DSM does not mention psychopathy at all. There was a little bit of an itch scratching at me after I made this podcast, and I was like, I think I need to go and at least check the index of the DSM and see if it's even mentioned. And so apparently it is. And in the DSM text revision, there's a section in the back where it's got alternative DSM models for personality disorders. Because personality disorders are so complex, there's sort of a redefining of all personality disorders, really, that are proposed in the DSM-5 TR. And so, as part of some redefining of antisocial personality disorder, there is a psychopathic feature specifier. And very long story short, the psychopathic specifier does essentially say that, and I'm just going to really high level sum this up, is that there's a lack of being unaffected by their actions, essentially. There's a lot of work going on out there to study brains of people who have committed very heinous things, and to show maybe some differences of brain activity in people who have committed heinous activities versus people who are nonviolent. And there's some differences in brain activity. I haven't done this research. And I know from listening to the last podcast on the left for years and years that they have caught on to this pattern through the years. They've talked about serial killers and extremely violent people of having head injuries as a kid or having childhood trauma. And these are things that I talked about in my previous podcast of these are things that can change your brain chemistry. And so it makes sense that the brain chemistry of someone with violent tendencies would look different from someone who hasn't. But also, just because any of these one or multiple things exist does not mean that someone is going to turn out to be murderous or violent. So that's why I think this topic is extremely complex. I was a little bit mortified watching myself back. It's like, okay, I feel super compelled to come back and clarify that, like, I actually don't know shit. Resume and enjoy the show. And so we're going to talk more about Dexter as an adult. But Dexter as a kid, okay, so one of the criteria for antisocial personality disorder, diagnostic criteria C, is that there's evidence of conduct disorder with onset before age 15. So you can't even technically diagnose someone with antisocial personality disorder if they have no evidence that they did have conduct disorder or could have been diagnosed with conduct disorder as a child. So there has to be a precursor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it also makes sense that when you're on the highway and somebody's tailing you and then they just vroom by you, it's so much easier to like yell out at them, you psychopath, than to you antisocial personality disorder.
Okay, that's fair. No one's going to whip out their DSM and find the diagnostic criteria for having. That makes sense. Good point. All right, and so for if Dexter as an adult is going to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, which is probably, like you said, the longer form of psychopath, did he have conduct disorder as a kid? So conduct disorder has ABC criteria. Basically, I'm not going to go through all this, but the diagnostic criteria A basically says that you need to have at least 3 of the 15 of these following things. Well, here's some of these things. Has been physically cruel to people, has been physically cruel to animals, and let's see, here's some other ones. Often lies to obtain goods or favors to avoid obligations. In other words, cons others, steals things, and there's other just like, stays out at night despite parental prohibitions beginning before the age 13. And again, I'm not going to go through all of them. So, yeah. And then B and C are basically just sort of nuanced things.
And this is before the age of 15?
Before the age of, let's see.
Do you have to meet every single one of those?
No, you just have to meet 3 of the 15 before the age of 15.
Maybe I should review that for my own.
I know. Thank you. That is such a good point. Oh my God, Ryan, you were totally making you're making. This is not planned, y'all. By the way, we made a show outline, but this is gold, man.
Wow.
Because this is exactly why diagnosis can be harmful, right? Because you can look at this and be like, "Am I?"
It's the same thing as if you think you have a bellyache. And then you go on the web and you try to diagnose yourself, and then all of a sudden you diagnose yourself with 10 problems.
Exactly. Okay, so sure, you can probably make the case that at least as a kid, Dexter had conduct disorder. Because even in that pilot episode that we saw, he's being cruel to animals, he's killing animals, we know that he's quickly escalating to wanting to harm a human, and he is hiding things from his dad. And so, yeah, there's some evidence there. However, yes, exactly what you just said. If you look at this shit long enough, you're probably going to diagnose yourself with half of this.
Yeah.
So, point made. Thank you very much. So, and we will definitely come back to more of this as we get into more of the story of Dexter. But before we digress too long into this stale shit, do you want to tell everybody why we are talking about Dexter today specifically and why you're back here to talk about Dexter?
I started watching Dexter basically when it first came out. One of my classmates, he allowed me to borrow that first season, and I fell in love with it. It was just a fantastic show. But even further, he was one of my classmates in a forensic program and a Bachelor of Science in Forensic Science. So I graduated in that field back in the day. And my first professional job was an actual forensic scientist.
Ta-da! We have a forensic scientist here in the house with us. So who better to talk about Dexter than an actual forensic scientist?
Yes.
And a mental health professional. Voila!
So yeah, that's what I did for 4.5 years before I met this lady here. After we met, we started kind of bouncing around in the oil and gas industry. So we were kind of hopping from one city to the next. So here we are now. But at the very beginning of my professional career, I was a forensic scientist. I'll kind of give you a little bit of breakdown about what it's like to work in a forensic lab. It's not like CSI, all glamorous and high tech, and you don't have computer screens solving the crime for you digitally. It's a lot of work. It's fun work. It's rewarding work. The crime lab that I worked in, it was broken down into 4 different sections. Those sections are physical evidence, DNA, toxicology, and narcotics. I'm biased because the section that I worked in was totally the coolest with the coolest people. I worked in physical evidence, and my specific specialty was firearms examination. So everything that I'm going to talk to you about today, keep in mind, it is coming from somebody with only 4.5 years experience in the field. I don't have 20 years experience. I don't have 30 years experience. This is all also from memory back, past a decade ago. But yes, I actually was a forensic scientist. I was specialized in firearms and crime scene investigation.
You are a forensic scientist. You are just not actively practicing as a forensic scientist. So don't sell yourself short, mister. So the first thing I want to ask about, well, first thing I just think that we noticed, or you pointed this out, and then once you pointed it out, I couldn't stop seeing it. In the pilot episode of Dexter, Dexter's driving around his super nice speedboat in the harbor. He's obviously, if you know, he's got a speedboat and he's got a slip somewhere in the harbor, and then he's got this waterfront condo. Tell everybody about the luxurious life of being a forensic scientist.
Okay, so no matter where you're a forensic scientist, I know that maybe if you're working in New York, or San Francisco, you'll probably be making a little bit more money than a forensic scientist, say in Louisiana, comparatively speaking. However, factoring in the cost of living, there's no way, unless Dexter Morgan had inherited a lot of money from Harry's maybe police life insurance policy when he died. That's just what I was trying to put together in my head. How is Dexter Morgan driving around in a $250,000 boat, and he has a harbor view, ocean view condo? Not really sure how he's managing, because working for the state, working for the parish, working for the city, you ain't making jack.
You're not making $200,000 speedboat, waterfront,
No.
condo type of money. So that was the first inconsistency that we saw.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said that there was other things that happened, especially in the pilot episode, because again, that's the most first thing that's on our mind. You know, where Dexter goes to the crime scene and he's like got the yarn set up and he's like analyzing the blood spatter patterns to try to solve the case. Say about what is the accuracy of something like that?
It is very accurate, very helpful. I worked at a full service crime lab, the biggest one in the state, and we had an expert or semi-expert in firearms, DNA, drugs, tox. Those are big branches. Fingerprints, big branches. Within physical evidence, you have your branches, and then you have your sub branches. So you have firearms, you have crime scene, you have fingerprints. But below that, you have even more of a niche branch that's very, very specialized. And it's something that you don't really, a skill that you don't use too often at crime scenes. Arson is one of them, because most states and cities, they already have like their fire marshals. So you don't necessarily have many people that are trained to do arson, that are trained to do shoe prints, that are trained to do blood spatter analysis. And that is spatter, SPATTER, not splatter, SPLATTER.
Do people confuse that often?
People do confuse the spatter from splatter.
Yeah.
So being at a Miami Metro type facility, you most likely don't have someone like Dexter Morgan, who is specifically a blood spatter analysis, and that's how he makes his money. Most likely, he's cross-trained doing something else, maybe something a little more major, something where he could be doing a little more day-to-day work. Because when I was a firearms examiner, my day-to-day work was looking in a comparison microscope at bullets to bullets, cartridge cases to cartridge cases, test firing firearms, trying to fix a gun that doesn't function anymore, taking parts and pieces to make that, that test gun fire, then typing up case notes. So that was a 9 to 5 type job.
So you would get a gun from a potential crime scene, you would fire it into the tank, you would take the cartridge casing, put it under a comparison microscope, and compare that to a casing that would be found at a crime scene. And that's how you catch the bad guys.
It is, but very a condensed way to catch the bad guys. Yes. So another thing that we also used to do is, and you probably see this on CSI too, is there is a database out there that collects images of cartridge cases, not bullets, cartridge cases. It is a boxy looking piece of equipment with cameras, 3D imaging system inside. And after you test fire a cartridge case, you take that cartridge case, place it in a slot, and everything's automated, pushes it inside the system, takes a whole bunch of different types of pictures and imaging on the cartridge case. And that cartridge case file goes into a system. It goes into a national system. And the matches, you're not necessarily going to get a match. First of all, it's not automatic. It's not automated. The system doesn't generate, oh, ding, 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 ding. This is your winner. Hello, you have a match. Case solved. You actually have to identify that manually, visually on the screen, see it for yourself, because it could be the third one in line, the 10th, it could be the 50th. So you have to go through all these images yourself, click by click.
So it gets close enough, and then you have to fine tune it with your own human eyes.
Yes. And then if there is a match, if you at your crime lab don't have the evidence in your possession and another jurisdiction, another agency has it, you have to request that they bring it back.
Right.
And then you actually have to match the real evidence to the real test fire. And then you have an official match.
Well, first of all, I think in CSI they match bullets, don't they?
So you do that too. You do match bullets, but the bullets aren't matched, or the assistance of the database is not there to help you with matching bullets.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about Ryan being a forensic scientist is anytime we're watching a movie or TV show and there's like guns involved, because I don't know a single thing about guns, even though I was raised in rural Alabama, all around guns. I don't know the first thing about them. And so I'll always ask Ryan for fun and curiosity, what kind of gun is that? Or is that a realistic thing that just happened? And one of the things that I asked Ryan about in Dexter Resurrection, so the first episode of Dexter Resurrection, they're showing a flashback to Dexter New Blood or something, the one where Dexter was in North
Dakota,
North wherever, and Harrison came and found him. And Harrison, there's a scene where Harrison basically shoots Dexter. Resurrection starts with Dexter waking up or in a coma after Harrison has shot him. And so I asked Ryan, I said, what type of gun is that? And was that a survivable injury?
My answer was no.
Yeah.
Because he was shot with a deer rifle. It was close enough to where they were having a conversation that they weren't raising their voices too much. A deer rifle, exiting wound right in the chest, almost center of the chest. I don't think that would have been a survivable wound to a survivable injury.
Yeah. So that's always fun to watch movies with Ryan, to pick his brain about how realistic is this, or what type of gun is this. We're watching a movie, The Nightingale, the other night, and I was asking questions about this old school musket. Was that a musket?
Yeah. So full disclosure, I am not a gun person. I'm not a gun guy. In fact, in my group of firearms examiners that I used to work with, I didn't even own a gun when I started working at the crime lab. I remember the moment where we did work with some police officers. One of the police officers said, "Hey, do you have a gun?" I'm like, "No." "Do you want to buy one?" And then I started like scratching my head. Do I want to buy a gun? How much are guns? And I didn't know. I really didn't know how much a semi-automatic pistol was. But he was selling one because he had 3 of the same gun. Some people just collect like multiple iterations of the same exact guns, make, model. he was selling one, and it was for a cheap price. So, boom, I bought a gun, and that was the first gun that I ever owned.
Yeah, the first time I ever shot a gun, I think, was with Ryan. This might have been one of our, not first dates, but like pretty early dates, yeah, sixth, seventh, eighth date or something. You took me to a range to fire a gun for the first time. That was probably the first and last time I fired a gun. Actually, we're lying. We are both very proficient at firing, and we have a house full of guns.
Yeah, we're lots of guns here. I'll tell you one funny gun story real quick. I'm not, as me not being a gun person.
We are gun people, Ryan. House full of guns, very proficient at shooting.
Wink, wink. We used to do a fun day as forensic firearms examiners, and we had a gun vault.
Okay, a Greyhound wanted to be here. Should we go? She's not feeling good today. She's feeling a little nauseous.
So this gun vault, we would use it as a spare parts kind of, where we would just take parts and pieces from those guns to make evidence guns work. But that one day of the year where we would maybe leave work after a couple hours of working, and we each would take our favorite guns from the vault and take ammunition from the vault, and then we would go to a firing range and just have like a field day. Just back when you were a kid and you just did something, you go to a water park. Well, this was kind of like a firearms examiner's version of going to the water park. Well, one of the guns we took was a Tommy gun from the mobster days. And then another gun that we took was a full automatic AK-47. So I was able to shoot. I didn't shoot the Tommy gun, but I did shoot the full automatic AK-47. Never shot a full automatic AK-47. One of the other forensic scientists was saying, hey, when you shoot this, it's going to ride up on you. Don't let it ride up on you. You got to hold it down. Well, once I pulled that trigger, it went way, way over the concrete wall.
Oh boy!
So not sure where that bullet wound up.
Oh god, it's horrifying. So we had a lot of fun watching Dexter Resurrection. We could not help to notice the really fun parallels. The intro where Harrison is brushing his teeth, flossing, instead of doing the French press coffee and the orange juice, he's picking up his vape pens. That was so fun. That was really nostalgic.
Like father, like son.
Yes, like father, like son. And you pointed out Harrison walking through the kitchen and being able to connect with other people via food, and then going back and watching the pilot episode of Dexter and handing out donuts to everybody. That was really fun to make those connections. And then the hefty bags, the Big Harbor Butcher disposing everybody in the hefty bags, and then Harrison in the new season dispose of his body in the hefty bag. So that was just really fun. Very nostalgic, being a huge fan of the originals series. And all the old characters coming back.
Right, yeah. The flashback of Dokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was...
You creepo motherfucker.
Yeah.
You creepy motherfucker.
Yep, Dokes. And then Harry, of course, he's in it. Harry's still kicking. And Detective...
Yes, Angel. I can't remember his last name. It's Angel...
Batiste.
Is it Batiste? Yeah.
I think it's Batiste.
I really want to continue watching the series because that's really nostalgic from having watched probably multiple times the original Dexter and just really enjoying it. But since you talked about the old characters popping back up in Dexter Resurrection, just to kind of go back to diagnosis for a second, I couldn't help but to think whenever Dexter, of course he's in a coma, right? But then all these people are coming to Dexter, and of course Dexter throughout the entire series has Harry, and so Dexter has this consistent theme of auditory and visual hallucinations, which is a sign of schizophrenia. And so now there is a such thing as having it's called comorbid diagnoses, and that's when you can have more than one. But there you go, there's just another one that you could just toss in the mix for Dexter, because he's having criteria for schizophrenia. I don't have it right in front of me, but is visual and auditory hallucinations of some sort. And he's having both because he's got Harry with him all the time, but then he's got, in Resurrection, he's got everybody from his past. It's like the ghost of Christmas past up in that bitch. Everybody's coming up and appearing to him. And so I was thinking about that. Oh, and then another diagnostic potentially was going back to watch the original Dexter was Dexter was preparing his kill room and to go into all this detail of putting up the saran wrap and finding location and setting up his tools and all that stuff. What did you say about that?
I think I said that that is just a whole lot of work.
Yeah.
A whole lot of work.
Yes. But to Dexter, I think it was a pilot episode where he says that preparing the ritual for him. Oh, he said the ritual is intoxicating, and so for you, that might be a lot of work. And hell yeah, it looks like a lot of work. But for Dexter, he said that ritual of going through that process is intoxicating to him. And so I wanted just to toss out another diagnosis: obsessive compulsive disorder. And so some diagnostic criteria of that is obsessions that are defined by recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or images that are experienced at some time during the disturbance as intrusive and unwanted, and that in most individuals caused by marked anxiety or distress. And the individual attempts to ignore or suppress such thoughts or images to neutralize them with some other thoughts or actions, aka performing the compulsion. So they need to do the thing, and in order to make it stop, they do the thing, or they spend so much time trying to avoid doing the thing. And then compulsions are defined by repetitive behaviors that an individual feels driven to perform in response to an obsession or according to rules that must be applied rigidly. The behaviors or mental acts are aimed at preventing or reducing anxiety or distress. So, in Dexter, he's trying to keep his dark passenger at bay. And so he's got to perform these rituals. Diagnostic criteria B is the obsessions or compulsions are time consuming, taking more than 1 hour. You reckon that kill room takes more than 1 hour?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then B and C and D are basically just says it's not attributed to any other mental disorder, essentially. And so there's something that could potentially fit for old Dexter.
One thing I kind of took in, and I'm thinking about it now, and tell me your thoughts. At the beginning of each episode, when they play the intro, he's eating, he's preparing a meal, he's grinding coffee beans, he's chopping up some eggs. But all throughout some of these episodes, he's bringing donuts to people. Do you think that they're just trying to show the human side of him? Like he is normal. He does these human things, like he eats. He has to eat food. Like we all have to do that. But at the same time, he has this other life, that we that only like 0.00001% of the population have.
Mm-hmm. White men.
White males over 30.
You did say at the top of the episode you were worried about that conduct disorder.
Yeah.
So. Uh-oh. Just kidding.
So when I talk about that, I talk about I have another funny forensic story. Is I interned at a coroner's office before I graduated, and there was a coroner at another parish. We don't call them counties here; we call them parishes. In another parish, who had a reputation for playing jokes on people who would come into his morgue when he was doing an autopsy. And the prank was he would play it predominantly on like detective police officers, but just anybody who would go in to his autopsy room. He would make himself a sandwich and he would start the autopsy. And anybody who came in, he would take a bite of his sandwich and then he would put it on the body and then take another bite of his sandwich. So speaking of normalizing just food, I'm human, I have to eat, but I'm also doing an autopsy on this body right here.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a meat suit. That's a
lunch meat suit.
Oh my God. But to go back to what you said, Dexter actually says in the pilot episode that that's Dexter's attempt to perform normalcy, is that he knows that he's off and he doesn't. Dexter claims that he doesn't feel feelings and he doesn't understand human emotions. And so that the only way that he can connect to people is by bringing donuts. And so, yeah, that makes sense that they show Dexter doing mundane things to make him human. And also his he does name that in the pilot episode that he's using food to connect to other people, which is a ritual that we all do in everyday life. I mean, think about when you hang out with friends, or you're trying to make a new friend. Hey, you want to meet up for coffee, or you want to go have dinner, or even date night. Say, let's go have dinner. That's just how people connect, is over food. So yeah, I think that sort of is a normalizing thing for both Dexter and the audience, and Dexter and the people that he's hanging around. Which brings me back to this antisocial personality disorder diagnosis, which we already talked about, that he needed to have conduct disorder as a kid, which, by the way, you don't have. You are. This is the kindest, sweetest, most sensitive man in the whole universe. Wouldn't hurt a fly.
Or my dog.
Yeah, so the diagnostic criteria for anti-personality disorder has to be at least 18, has to have onset of conduct disorder before 15, and it's criteria D, the occurrence of antisocial behavior is not exclusively during the course of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. So you're not just having like an episode. That's got to be like a ongoing thing. But criteria A is a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others occurring since age 15, as indicated by 3 or more of the following. You just have to have 3 of the 7 criteria they have listed here. Failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors, as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. Well, he's fucking killing people, so I think that's fair. Deceitfulness, as indicated by repeated lying, use of aliases, or conning others for personal profit or pleasure. Could maybe say pleasure in Dexter's case. Impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. I think that probably does not fit, because Dexter is extremely thoughtful and does a lot of planning ahead. Irritability and aggressiveness, as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. Did Dexter get in a lot of fights?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure he was in some scuffles here and there, but I don't remember him ever like getting in a fight. Rita did have a husband that was violent, abusive.
Yeah.
And maybe one of those episodes, there was some kind of fight with him, maybe.
But I would argue maybe out of protection for Rita.
Oh, right.
I think maybe that's a link to that impulsivity. I think maybe we know some people that don't necessarily have antisocial personality disorder that just they're just looking for a fight, or have what's it called? Hairpin trigger?
Yeah.
Hair trigger.
Yeah.
You should know this. Isn't that a gun thing?
Yeah, it's a gun thing.
Yeah. Reckless disregard for safety of self for others. I guess reckless, you could say reckless for others. Consistent irresponsibility, as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. I don't think that fits, because he's a model employee for the most part. And lack of remorse, as indicated by being indifferent or rationalizing having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. You got the rationalization there, I would say, because he's got the code.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say it fits. Dexter does make a point in the first episode to say, I don't feel anything. So if I felt love for anybody, it might be Deb, but I don't feel anything. And I just don't think that's true. I think the more we've gotten to know Dexter over like the course of all the seasons of Dexter, into the New York season, and then Resurrection, I argue that Dexter has feelings. I think Dexter was told that he did not have feelings as a kid, and therefore he internalized that message and took that on and decided he didn't have feelings. What do you think?
I do think he does have feelings. I think that he gradually develops maybe not so much in the first season, but over time, like we all say, once you get older, you get a little softer, you get a little more sensitive. And I think Dexter, same thing for him. Like, he develops feelings. He has an attachment with Rita. He has an attachment with Rita's 2 kids. And then Rita and him have their own kid, Harrison. And he still wants to ensure that Harrison is okay, doing well, and wants to take care of Harrison.
Yeah, doesn't fit no feelings, no regard, selfish kind of thing. I don't quite agree with something that you just said. You said that we all get a little bit softer when we get older. Not that I disagree, but I do think that we all have the capability of being sensitive and attuned and compassionate at any point in our lives. I do think that there's these societal expectations about it being weak to show emotion or it being weak to be, quote, soft. You even just said it yourself unintentionally, but I think that's a societal message that gets ingrained in us, and especially men. And sure, I think maybe that part wears off over time because at some point you just stop giving a shit and maybe you just let those
Let it
expectations
go.
down.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little sad to live your whole life thinking that it's not okay to feel your feelings and connect with others and have to shove it down and feel like showing feelings are a weakness. I just think in Dexter's case that Harry got into his head from an early age, and Harry defined who he was.
Yeah.
Look, now that we've talked about, I've gone through the gamut of diagnosis with Dexter, tossing it out. Tossing it out because now I'm sure everyone now, we all think we have antisocial personality disorder and obsessed ODD and
Yeah, I fit the bill.
and yeah, exactly. So toss it all out because this is exactly what I was talking about in my first episode of my podcast about you get these labels attached and you feel like you're stuck with it and it feels like something's wrong with you. Well, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make about Dexter. Dexter was told that there was something wrong with him, and then he carried that for his entire life. There's a moment in the Dexter pilot episode where, from my point of view, the explanation of Dexter's Dark Passenger was born. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about my point of view about Dexter's Dark Passenger based on this. All right, so do you want to be Harry or Dexter?
I can't read it.
You know why Ryan can't read it? It's because he can't see.
When you're reading it, you have it exploded, and then when
Okay,
I read it,
maybe it's because you can't see. I see you doing this, like you can't see. What happened? You haven't zoomed in so far because you can't fucking see, Ron. You need fucking glasses. It cuts the words off. You need to get your reading glasses.
Maybe.
Just so y'all know, we did this take like 5 times, but Ryan can't see, and he's in so much denial about needing glasses and will not wear his glasses, and was not able to read from the screen without doing this constantly long enough to be able to read his acting dialogue. So do like your mama and daddy say, and your wifey, and get some glasses. All right, so this is a scene from the pilot.
You and I had an understanding. Whenever you get an urge, you come to me, you tell me, and we deal with it together.
I do tell you, Dad.
The hell you do. There's blood on this knife.
Animals. I find animals, that's all.
Are you sure? Are you telling me the truth?
Yes.
I thought we had this under control. You still don't remember anything from before? You know, before we took you in?
No. Is that why I have these urges?
What happened changed something inside you. It got into you too early. I'm afraid your urge to kill is only going to get stronger.
You're saying I'll be like this forever?
You're a good kid, Dex. You are. Otherwise, it would have been a lot worse than animals. Okay, so we can't stop this.
Well, we know that Dexter had trauma. You see a glimpse of it here and there, and then you really see what happened to him when he was 4, maybe 3. For me, I don't really have many memories before 4, before 5, before 6. I have very, very few memories that stuck with me or that is still with me. Dexter, when he had this huge, big traumatic event when he was around that age, I think that the show wants you to know that that event basically just was the creation of him, of who he was. That was in his memory, in his mind. I don't think he fully understood what that event, but that event created the killer that developed throughout the course of his life.
When we got to get glasses.
This is another PSA.
Dexter has a clearly experienced trauma. I don't remember a whole lot about it because again, it's been a while since we saw the full episode, and But there are some flashbacks in this original episode from Dexter and his brother, who we do start to get introduced to in the pilot episode of Dexter, who's the ice truck killer. And something along the lines of their mother was killed in a storage container.
I wouldn't say killed is the right word. She was slain
Violently.
And it was witnessed by Dexter and Dexter's sibling, younger sibling.
Yeah, I don't remember how old they were. It's maybe arguable how much they might actually cognitively remember versus like somatically remember. Like that trauma was written into their psyche, whatever, their body, whatever happened in that moment. And so that's what that scene is in reference to is, something got into you early. And one of the definitions I've heard of trauma is a little bit something like you're trying to close the loop. So if there's something about your body, your mind that is repeating the trauma that happened because you're subconsciously trying to prevent it from happening again. And so for Dexter, if he can just go after the killers, maybe he can prevent his mother from dying and maybe his life would have turned out differently. This trauma symptom, this dark passenger part, we're going to shift into some IFS work here. This part of Dexter was born as a result of his trauma. And so from the internal family systems, the IFS point of view, that's exactly how parts are born. I mean, every human being we have parts of ourselves, but people with trauma have essentially more parts because when something traumatic happens to someone, it creates parts, even more protector parts to protect the wounded parts. And so you're creating more protectors, you're creating more wounded parts, you're creating more what's called exiles to get in a really technical language. And so Dexter created a very specific part called the dark passenger, which on one hand, I think is just such a beautiful example of internal family systems theory in Dexter. I mentioned in one of my podcasts, I think maybe it was the introductory one, that when you really do IFS therapy in practice, you really do start to meet your parts and find out they have personalities and they have backstories and they have histories. And it just so happens that in Dexter, we get to see this manifestation of the dark passenger, which is a part of him that already has a name. It already has a personality. It already has a backstory. We know when it was born. It was born this moment his mother died. And we know what its mission is. There's a moment in Dexter where where Dexter's at this crossroads, where Harry offers him a choice.
But maybe we can do something to channel it. Use it for good.
How can it ever be good?
Son, there are people out there who do really bad things. Terrible people. And the police can't catch them all. Do you understand what I'm saying?
You're saying they deserve it.
That's right. But of course you have to learn how to spot them. How to cover your tracks. But I can teach you.
Dad.
It's okay, Dex. You can't help what happened to you. But you can make the best of it. Remember this forever. You are my son. You are not alone, and you are loved.
Here's how you can channel your dark passenger. And the dark passenger was given a choice. It was given an identity by Harry. And it was given this code of ethics by Harry. And that became the dark passenger's mission. And so that became the dark passenger's way of protecting Dexter and protecting others per this code of ethics.
Well, if you were Harry, and because Harry, if you hadn't seen the show, Harry was one of the officers that were first on the scene to find Dexter and his younger sibling in the shipping container with their dead mother. So Harry adopted Dexter. If you were Harry and you adopted Dexter, and you know Dexter at that age experienced trauma, and eventually, few years later, Dexter started developing this pattern of murderous child behavior. He was barbecuing ants with a magnifying glass, and then all of a sudden he's slaying rabbits and then bigger animals, and then he's telling his dad, yeah, think about killing humans too. What would you have done would have been the appropriate action for Harry?
I'm getting nervous even as you ask that question. Violence makes me so fucking uncomfortable. Like, that's why I'm struggling over here. Like, violence makes me so uncomfortable, and that's why I'm saying, like, I would really struggle, because like violence makes me hella uncomfortable, which is why I think Dexter is a fun show, because yeah, the whole killer of killers, the whole like Dexter kind of as a superhero kind of thing, like that's fun for the movies. But like when you now that we're kind of talking about it like in theory of like real life, like what would that look like? Now that's starting to make me really fucking nervous, because like violence makes me incredibly nervous. I will say Harry in general, Dexter talks about what a good dad Harry was, and that like Dexter said that he would probably be dead or in jail or lost, him and Deb both, if it wasn't for Harry. There's a lot of evidence that Harry was a really wonderful dad and they had a really great attachment and that he did the best he could. I do in real life, Harry set him on the wrong path, if this was real life, because killing is wrong, no matter how you slice it or whatever reason. And so, in my opinion, Dexter needed trauma therapy, right? He needed, I don't know anything about kids, so I'm not even gonna like get into out of my league here. I know that there's lots of really interesting ways to help children recover from trauma, play therapy. And this is why attachment figures are so important. This is why Harry single-handedly put Dexter on his path, gave him this identity, and I think instilled this whole idea in him that you don't have feelings, you're not like everybody else. And this stuck with Dexter his entire life. So I think if Harry would have helped Dexter redirect those violent urges, or help the dark path from an IFS perspective, help unburden that dark passenger's desire to cause harm to others, and in a way that was healthy, I don't know, artwork, boxing, anything that was not going to impede on someone else's life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness. Because let's be real, Dexter does end up harming, like, put everything else aside of the code and whatever, Dexter does end up harming a lot of innocent people.
And that was the question that I had. You mentioned it just a moment ago about the superhero kind of character that Dexter can kind of take on, because he is killing the evil people. He's killing killers. He's killing people who commit violent crimes. So is that acceptable? Is that okay for him to have a mission to take the people that are really, really bad off the streets? And even it is mentioned in one of the episodes that the justice system does not always work. Sometimes people slip through the cracks. So it's Dexter's responsibility, told to him through the lens of Harry, to eliminate those people that are undesirables.
It's fun for a show, and I think that's why horror can be fun. But I think in real life, I have a very firm belief that no one is born bad, and that these behaviors, these tendencies are developed for a reason. And if they develop for a reason, they can be undone. People can be rehabilitated. We live in a society where our criminal justice system is extremely fucked up. I'm very much against capital punishment, so therefore I don't think that Dexter's actions in the real world would be justified. It's wrong. Even the worst of the people deserve compassion. This is all coming from the place of compassion, which is where IFS all stems from, is that we have compassion, curiosity of other people. But that doesn't mean that we live in a society without consequences. I'm not saying that like we don't have consequences for these things and we let people go or whatever. They should be punished, but Dexter is not a superhero.
And also, innocent people do die.
Yes.
Because he's living a high-risk lifestyle. He kind of gets wrapped up in certain engagements with people who are probably even more dangerous than him. And then they realize that, oh, Dexter's the one that's after me. Maybe I'll go after Dexter. Also, there's the element of mistaking. Not everybody's right 100% of the time. So maybe sometimes Dexter, he might mistake somebody for a murder or a a violent criminal, sometimes you do have the wrong person.
Dexter is a fictional character at the end of the day, and this is all fun on the TV show, but in real life, this is not okay. So, which leads me to another point. Again, I'm obviously super fucking uncomfortable talking about this because violence makes me uncomfortable and I don't even like to talk about it. I want to talk about the counseling code of ethics. Dexter's got a code of ethics. Well, the counselors, we have multiple codes of ethics. And so I have been thinking about this episode and thinking about what would it be like to have Dexter as a client and how would I have to treat him? Well, first of all, I've already said, I met Dexter and, I got to know Dexter's dark passenger, I would want to help it unburden this desire to harm others and redirect it into something that was able to satisfy it in a way. I don't know, just throw out some shit, art, boxing, exercise.
Healthy ways.
Healthy outlets. There we go. Help it find some healthy outlets. And so I want to talk a little bit about the code of ethics. And so for the counseling code of ethics, there's a couple things that I have to keep in mind when it comes to breaching confidentiality. And so according to my counseling code of ethics is that, and I see this on TV shows. Remember that movie, that TV show, Evil?
Right.
Yeah, because this got talked a lot in that TV show Evil because it was a therapist who had actually killed somebody, and then she was talking to her own therapist, and they were having conversations about this around like, what if I hurt somebody and told you about that? Well, you have to tell on me.
Yeah.
And so it's important that you can feel like you can come to counseling and feel like your therapist is going to not tell anybody your shit. That's very important. So confidentiality is a very important part of therapy. However, there are some exceptions to confidentiality in therapy. And this is something, if you are in therapy or you are thinking about going to therapy, I take informed consent it's called informed consent. I take that extremely seriously with my clients because informed consent is informed consent for a reason. You don't have to tell your therapist things that may implicate you. It is your choice what you tell your therapist or not. And so there are things that if you do tell your therapist that they would have to breach confidentiality. So some of those things are if they tell you about they're harming a child, an elderly person, or a vulnerable person, if they tell you about someone else who's doing it, if they tell you that they are going to have a plan to harm themselves, and that's a serious plan. That's not just like ideation. That's like, oh, they've got there's like a plan in place, and some means that's like a ideation and something very different. And the same with harming someone else. And so as a therapist, if I think that you might harm somebody else and there's a plan in place, and this is very different from violent ideations, right? Oh, I'm gonna fucking kill you the next time you overcook my shrimp, Ryan. that's different. But then, I might check in and be like, hey, did you mean that? Like, nope, didn't mean that though. But what the ACA, the American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, says about that is an exception to confidentiality specifically says the general requirement that counselors keep information confidential does not apply when disclosure is required to protect clients or identified others from serious and foreseeable harm, or when legal requirements demand that confidential information must be revealed. Counselors consult with other professionals when in doubt as to the validity of an exception. So what did you hear in there? I'm just curious.
If somebody comes to you like, I want to harm myself, they have a plan. They want to harm themselves or they want to harm somebody else. However, there could be exceptions. So that's why you as a counselor have to seek supervision.
Right. That's why ethics are not straightforward for counselors, right? Like they're not black and white. And so if I'm in doubt or have questions, like it's okay for me to check in with colleagues or my supervisor to run the scenario by them and see what they have to say. The other thing that I take away from that code of ethics, as it says, when legal requirements demand that confidential information must be revealed. And so then I go and see the legal requirement for the state that I'm in, and this is what that says. When a patient has communicated a threat of physical violence, which is deemed to be significant in the clinical judgment of the treating psychologist, mental health professional, against a clearly identified victim or victims, coupled with the apparent intent and ability to carry out such threat, a duty to warn or protect arises. The duty is discharged if the treating professional makes a reasonable effort to communicate the threat to the potential victim or victims and to notify law enforcement authorities in the vicinity of the patient's or potential victim's residence. Also provides for immunity for disclosure. That means me as a therapist, I'm not going to get in trouble for breaching confidentiality. So, and the legal requirement says deemed significant in the clinical judgment.
That's a gray area.
I hate it so fucking much.
So if you know Jamie at all, you know that she's a very black and white person. She has to have a set of rules and guidelines to follow.
I'm an ex-engineer. I need fucking flowcharts.
When it comes to making a judgment call, it's not her finest moment to make that judgment call on her own. But the beauty of being a therapist is you have supervision, and it's not all on you. It is a team effort to make a call to this gravity.
I'm like uncomfortable even talking about this right now. This is what happens. Yeah, Ryan's exactly right. And I did talk about this in other podcasts. I said that this being an ex-engineer, I'm not an ex-engineer. I'm an engineer. Having that engineering brain, this is where this shit shows up in my practice, because I do get caught up on this. What is significant? What is clinical judgment?
Well, we all know how Louisiana law is. And if what you are reading is... It's
straight out of it's a statute. LA Revision Statute 2800.2.
Louisiana law can make you believe that the sky is green. And we'd all believe it.
Well, here's where I get all aggravated in my nervous system about this, is because on one hand, kind of going back even about Dexter being wrong about his code, right? If I'm wrong about my code, right? If I'm wrong in my clinical judgment, the downside is I could potentially really fuck someone up I could break that trust from a client and really fuck them up from therapy for the rest of their life. At least that's my fear. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if I'm right, I'm going to save someone's life potentially. And I wanted to just throw another little tidbit in there. The reason that we have a duty to warn as a therapist is because of this. It's called Tarasoff versus the Regents of the University of California in 1976. And so in this case, basically this person told their therapist that they had intention to kill or harm a person. I forget who it was exactly. And so that therapist got sued for negligence or something like that, because claiming that the therapist knew that this was going to happen and they failed to warn. And so now that's why that's a standard in our profession, is that yes, we have to keep all things confidential, but we do have a duty to keep the public safe when there's specific threats out there. And so again, that's why ideation is very different from specific threats. And so, yeah, I do get caught up in the nuance of the language sometimes. I have gotten, and like Brian said, I think one of the things I've gotten much better at as a therapist, as being okay with consulting and leaning on others, which is, I gotta say, in my 37 years, it's not something I ever liked to do or was really good at, but like I got a really good team of folks these days that I'm always kicking these things around with. And if I didn't have it, I don't know if I could do this job. And so, yes, that consulting part is just so important in this job. I mean, there's a part of me that was like, I would love to work with Dexter as Dark Passenger. I would love that opportunity to help him redirect that into something more healthier and positive, and to make his life feel more free and unburdened. And on the other hand, I would be on guard of also that Dark Passenger and the potential of having to report Dexter's intention, because we've seen Dexter, we know the show, we know that he continues to kill. So I would have to discharge my duty with Dexter at some point, because I'm sure at some point he would tell me, or maybe he wouldn't. If he never told me, I wouldn't have to. So
okay, yeah,
because he would be under informed consent, and it would be his choice to tell me or not. So is there anything else that feels like important that we missed or didn't cover?
No, I think we did a pretty good job of covering everything. And the people out there who have never had a chance to watch Dexter, start from the beginning. Start from season 1, episode 1, and then don't start at where they are now, Resurrection. Even though it's great, you could just pick this up and start watching Resurrection and just watch that season, I think you're doing yourself an injustice if you kind of start from the end and then work your way to the beginning. It's such a great series. Lots of great acting. Miami is where they filmed it, and Miami is amazing. Miami's just a cool place. It's a lot like New Orleans. I think Miami has its own little cultural vibe. Um,
Yes, it's such a good show. So, kind of the way I've been ending this is to talk about any demons that might be exorcised by putting this into the world for literally anybody and everybody to listen to. I think the demon I have is, even as I'm sitting here thinking about my discomfort with violence. And I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. It's not just a discomfort with violence. And also this tension of knowing that just because someone is violent does not make them inherently broken. What's the word for
Redeemed.
redeemed? Yes, it can be redeemed. It can be healed. I believe that. I believe in the power of healing. And as always, there are consequences for actions. And so just because there's healing and grace doesn't mean that we're free of consequences. And I just think it was so interesting doing this episode with you, and how you reminded me of, I don't have to do ethical decisions alone. I think that was really empowering. So thank you for freeing me of that demon of having to feel this burden of making all of these decisions with this ambiguous language with my black and white brain sometimes. That was really empowering. And also, it felt very validating to hear, even as we talked about diagnostic language, even as I'm sitting here, I have this like reel going on in my brain that's saying, is it harmful that I even talked about all this diagnostic language in this episode? Because I don't particularly even believe in it. And I think that even you validated how bullshit it can be just by you even saying, hey, on now. I think I even could be diagnosed with that. But I think it proved the point by you pointing that out. So that was super helpful. And also, I don't want to take away from the fact that it can diagnosis can help people understand themselves better. So I feel less alone by you today, and I feel less alone out there in my therapist community. And as usual, I feel pretty vulnerable. So, yes, I've exercised the demon of isolation.
Okay.
So, which is an odd connection to make.
Well, I guess I have exercised the demon of I'll need to buy a pair of damn reading glasses. That was the one thing that I have been putting off to the side. Second thing.
That's bullshit. His dad gave him a pair. He has a pair.
Second. Number two. I don't have kids. We don't have kids. We'll never have kids. I do have young kids in my immediate family, nephews and a niece. If you see kids steering the wrong way, if you see kids growing the most smallest sense of a dark passenger growing and developing at a very young age, don't do what Harry did. Don't guide them on a destructive rampage of violence and murder. Send them Jamie's way, or send them to a mental therapist that is equipped to handle kids and equipped to counsel kids.
Because you don't have to do it alone either, and your child doesn't have to do it alone.
As parents, you don't have to do it alone. There's help out there. There's resources.
Just a quick side note here. Ryan is right. There are resources out there, just to let y'all know. If you're having violent, homicidal urges, thoughts, and would like to talk to somebody, please do before something bad happens. I will drop a link in the show notes. But 988 is a very quick one. You can either text or call. TheTrevorProject.org, you can either text or call or chat with a crisis volunteer. And again, just because you talk about violent ideation or suicidal ideation doesn't mean someone's going to commit you or that you're broken or something's wrong with you. But it is okay to reach out for help before things progress to a point of no return. Yeah. And yeah, I think that that's an interesting point, Ryan, because I think in Dexter's case and in the show, it was so overt. Harry was like, "You're violent. You've got the dark passenger. This is what we're going to do about it, and this is who you are." Like, it was super overt. I think in real life, it's not that way. But modeling their parents, modeling the people around them, and so even though it's not so explicit, the messages that kids are sent are often very implicit by the people around them. And so that's something important to remember, that kids are like sponges, and the people around them and even society has a really big, is going to impact them and it's going to steer them.
So people around them and society can create dark passengers.
And feed the dark passenger. There you go. What did it feel like to make this episode?
It felt great because you and I, we just connected two things together that you have a passion for and I have a passion for. Something you went to school for and something that I went to school for. Forensics was a part of my life that I'll never, ever forget, cherish until the day I die. And being able to like talk about Dexter. Dexter is one of the very first series we've watched together as a couple.
Yeah, that's true. You let me borrow, I think, the DVDs that you had.
Yeah. And we rewatched it.
Yes.
We rewatched it as a couple.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was great for me to bring it all in, like all of our favorite things, horror, mental health, forensic science, and it's like wrap it all into one ball of yarn and
sew it together. Okay. The microphone has been muted the whole time. I'm just kidding.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
I'm just kidding.
We've been sitting here for an hour and a half. I have the sweats.
Turn around. Okay, bye.